You know that thing you're doing right now? That pattern where something good finally enters your life? Something that could actually fill the hollow space you've been carrying around? And instead of letting it stay, instead of allowing it to take root, you find yourself systematically dismantling it. Maybe it's a relationship with someone who actually sees you. Maybe it's a creative project that makes you feel alive for the first time in years. Maybe it's a routine that brings you peace, a friendship that offers genuine connection, or even just a moment of contentment that doesn't require anything from you except presence. And what do? You sabotage it. You create distance. You manufacture conflict. You ghost. You quit. You burn it down before it can disappoint you, before it can leave, before it can reveal itself as another illusion in a long line of illusions that promised meaning and delivered nothing but sharper awareness of the void. You tell yourself you don't know why you do this. You call it self-destructive. You wonder if you're broken, fundamentally damaged in some way, that makes you unfit for the very things you claim to want. You watch yourself sabotage with a kind of horrified fascination. Like you're observing someone else pilot your body while you scream from somewhere deep inside, trying to stop the demolition but unable to override the impulse. And afterward, when it's done, when you've successfully destroyed whatever good thing was threatening to stay, you feel that familiar ache return, that emptiness you were trying to escape. Except now it's worse, because you know you did this to yourself. You had a way out and you chose the void. But what if I told you that this sabotage, this seemingly self-destructive pattern that makes you question your own sanity, is not a malfunction at all? What if the impulse to destroy what could save you is actually the most honest thing you're doing? The only authentic response your psyche can produce when confronted with something that threatens to pull you out of the very identity you've built around your emptiness? What if you're not broken? What if you're protecting something far more fundamental than happiness? Something your conscious mind doesn't even recognize you're guarding. Most people spend their entire lives trying to fill their voids with external things. Relationships, achievements, pleasures, distractions, an endless rotation of substitutes for something they can't quite name. They optimize their lives for contentment, for stability, for the absence of pain. And they wonder why it all feels hollow. Why satisfaction never lasts, why even when they get exactly what they thought they wanted, the emptiness returns like a tide they can't hold back. They think the problem is that they haven't found the right thing yet. The right person, the right career, the right city, the right version of themselves. So they keep searching, keep consuming, keep acquiring each new thing, promising to be the one that finally works. But you've moved past that phase. Whether you realized it or not, you've discovered something they're still avoiding. You've seen through the mechanism. You understand, at least on some level, your conscious mind hasn't fully articulated yet. That nothing external can fill the void because the void isn't a problem to be solved. It's not a gap waiting to be filled. It's something else entirely. Something that our entire culture is designed to help us avoid confronting. Martin Heidegger spent his life trying to articulate this exact phenomenon. He called it thrownness, the condition of being hurled into existence without instruction manual, without inherent purpose, without meaning except what we create or discover. He talked about how we flee from this awareness into what he called the they, the comfortable numbness of social convention, of doing what one does, of losing ourselves in the crowd's consensus about what matters. We busy ourselves with concerns, with projects, with the everyday machinery of being a person. Anything to avoid confronting the raw fact of existence itself, the groundlessness of it all. And here's what Heidegger understood, that most self-help philosophy completely misses. This flight isn't a mistake, it's necessary. We cannot function while staring directly into the abyss of our own contingency. We need the illusions, the structures, the stories that give our lives shape and meaning. We need to forget, most of the time, that we're beings who will die, that everything we build will crumble, that the universe is fundamentally indifferent to our suffering or joy. But sometimes, something breaks through. Sometimes the numbness cracks and you glimpse what's underneath. Not a problem to be fixed, not an emptiness to be filled, but something more terrifying. Freedom, radical, absolute, nauseating freedom. The recognition that you are not your role, your relationships, your achievements, your personality, You are the awareness that watches all of those things, the space in which experience happens, the void that no object can fill because it was never empty in the first place. This is what happened to you. At some point, probably through pain, probably through repeated disappointments that stripped away your belief in the salvation narratives our culture sells, you stopped being able to maintain the illusion that anything external can address the fundamental condition of existence. And now, when something good comes along, something that could return you to that comfortable numbness, something that could let you forget again and sink back into the dream of meaning and purpose, your psyche recognizes it as a threat. Let me give you an analogy. Imagine you've been living in a dark room your entire life. It's all you've known. You've decorated this darkness, made it comfortable, learned to navigate by feel. You've told yourself stories about what's in the room with you, created an entire world out of shadows and imagination. And then one day, someone cracks open a door and light pours in. For a split second, you see the room as it actually is. Bare walls, no decoration, the furniture you imagined doesn't exist. The stories you told yourself were just that, stories. The light is painful. It reveals how much smaller and emptier the room is than you believed. It strips away all the comforting fictions you'd constructed. Now, someone offers to open the door completely. They promise it will be better in the light, that you'll be able to see clearly, that you'll finally understand where you are, and something in you recoils. Not because you're damaged or self-destructive, but because returning to the darkness feels safer than facing what the light reveals. At least in the darkness, you could pretend, you could maintain the illusions. You could believe in the furniture you'd imagined. The light doesn't offer comfort, it offers truth. And truth, in this case, is the recognition that the room was always empty, that you were always alone with your own awareness, that nothing you add to it will fundamentally change what it is. So, you slam the door shut, you sabotage the light source, you choose the familiar darkness over the unbearable clarity. And everyone around you thinks you're running from something good, but you know better. You're running from something that would force you to abandon the only identity you have left, the one built around your awareness of the void. Here's what you must understand. Most people who offer to save you, who present themselves as the answer to your emptiness, are themselves fleeing from the same recognition. They need you to be fixed because your brokenness reminds them of their own. They need the relationship to work because they're using it to avoid confronting their own groundlessness. They're not offering you truth, they're offering you a mutual agreement to forget. A partnership in comfortable numbness, a conspiracy to pretend that two people clinging to each other in the dark somehow makes the darkness less dark. And if you're still here, if this is resonating somewhere deeper than your thoughts can quite reach, maybe it's time to join the space where we explore these depths every single week. You already know this isn't surface-level content. You know where the button is. The usual response to this kind of existential recognition is to fight it. People try to force themselves back into normal life. They pursue relationships more aggressively. They throw themselves into work, into pleasure, into anything that might restore the numbness they've lost. They take medication, they go to therapy, they join communities, they start projects. Anything to fill the schedule, to occupy the mind, to avoid the quiet moments when the truth creeps back in. And it doesn't work. It can't work. Because you can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unknow what you know. The light has already entered. The room has already been revealed. This is the escalation trap. Each attempt to return to the comfortable illusion requires more force, more distraction, more intensity. The pleasures have to be stronger. The relationships have to be more consuming. The achievements have to be more impressive. You're running faster and faster on a treadmill that's speeding up to match your pace, and all you're doing is exhausting yourself while staying exactly where you started. The void doesn't shrink, it grows. Not because there's more emptiness, but because your awareness of it sharpens with each failed attempt to escape it. And here's the extraordinary thing that almost no one tells you. What if you stopped running? What if you stopped sabotaging, not by forcing yourself to accept the things that could save you, but by recognizing that you don't need saving? What if the sabotage is your psyche's way of protecting you from returning to a state of comfortable unconsciousness that is no longer compatible with who you've become? There's a state, and it doesn't have a good name in English, but we might call it void consciousness. Not the absence of feeling, but the presence of awareness that doesn't require content to justify itself. Most people live their entire lives without accessing this, and they don't miss it because they don't know it exists. They fill their time with concerns and connections and pursuits, and that's fine. That's how most human lives are structured. But some people, through trauma or insight or repeated disillusionment or some combination that can't be predicted or replicated, glimpse something underneath all that activity. They see the canvas on which experience is painted, and once you see the canvas, it's very hard to get lost in the painting again. Void consciousness doesn't depend on anything external. It's not a mood that needs to be maintained through specific conditions. It's not a high that requires a substance or an experience to trigger. It's the recognition that awareness itself, empty awareness, the space in which thoughts and feelings and sensations appear, is already complete. It was never lacking anything. The void was never a problem. You were the void, and you were calling it emptiness only because you were trained to believe that existence requires content, that life requires meaning, that awareness requires objects. This sounds abstract, I know. It sounds like philosophical wordplay, but here's how it manifests in lived experience. You stop needing things to be different than they are. Not because you're numb or defeated or accepting some gray mediocrity, but because the part of you that was generating the need for difference, the lack, the grasping, reveals itself as optional. You can still want things. You can still pursue goals, form relationships, feel pleasure and pain. But there's a quality of non-attachment that wasn't there before. You're no longer using external things to validate your existence or fill a fundamental lack, because you've recognized that the lack was itself an illusion created by misidentifying with content instead of context, with the painting instead of the canvas. Now, I must warn you about something. When I describe this state, you might think it sounds rather dull. No peaks of ecstasy, no drama of suffering, no intensity of desperate seeking. Just awareness, being aware, without requiring anything in particular to be aware of. And you'd be right to be skeptical, because from the perspective of someone who's still identified with the need for intensity, for meaning, for purpose, this sounds like death. It sounds like giving up. It sounds like settling for a gray nothing when you could be fighting for a colorful something. But here's what you're missing. The intensity you're addicted to. The drama you keep creating through sabotage and crisis and desperate seeking, that's not aliveness. That's the frantic activity of someone trying to convince themselves they exist by generating strong sensations. It's exhausting. It's unsustainable. And at the core of it, it's driven by fear, by the terror of confronting what happens when you stop running. When you let yourself be still, when you allow the void to reveal what it actually is instead of what you've been told it must be. The void consciousness I'm describing is not the opposite of intensity. It's what intensity looks like when it's not being used as an escape. It's the difference between drowning and swimming. When you're drowning, every movement is frantic, urgent, a fight for survival. When you're swimming, there can be just as much movement, just as much exertion, but it's coming from a different place. There's no panic underneath it. You're not moving to escape something, you're moving because that's what you've chosen to do in this moment. Let me tell you about someone. She was, by all external measures, successful at generating meaning. Impressive career, creative projects that got attention, relationships that others envied, a life that looked from the outside like everything working, but inside, she felt nothing. She'd gone through some extended period of loss, the details don't matter, and it had stripped away her ability to believe in any of the stories that had previously given her life structure. She kept going through the motions because she didn't know what else to do. Work, relationships, hobbies, all of it felt like performance, like she was playing a role she'd forgotten the purpose of. And here's what she noticed. Whenever something good entered her life, something that seemed like it might restore meaning, might reconnect her to the sense of purpose she'd lost, she would sabotage it. Not dramatically, not in ways that looked obviously self-destructive, just small choices, picking fights, creating distance, letting things fall apart through strategic neglect, and she hated herself for it. Thought there was something fundamentally broken in her that made her allergic to happiness, until one afternoon, she was sitting alone in her apartment. In that particular kind of silence that comes when you've run out of distractions and there's nothing left to do but be with yourself, and she had this recognition. She wasn't sabotaging happiness. She was sabotaging the pretense of happiness, the performance of meaning. The return to a state of comfortable unconsciousness that was no longer available to her. The things she was destroying weren't actually good for her. They were good for the version of her that no longer existed. The one who could still believe that external circumstances determine internal states, that the right combination of life events could produce lasting satisfaction. What changed? She stopped trying to force herself back into the shape of someone for whom conventional sources of meaning still worked. She stopped treating her inability to connect with normal life as a problem to be fixed. And something unexpected happened. She discovered that the void she'd been terrified of, the emptiness she'd been trying to escape through increasingly desperate attempts at creating meaning, wasn't actually empty. It was full. Not full of content, not full of objects or experiences or relationships, but full of awareness itself. The part of her that was aware of the void was the void, and it had never been lacking anything. Did her life change externally? Not much. She still had work, still had relationships, still pursued projects. But the quality of her engagement with all of it transformed. She stopped using life to justify her existence and started simply existing, allowing life to happen through her without needing it to mean anything in particular. And paradoxically, that's when things started to actually matter again. Not because they filled a lack, but because there was no lack to fill. She could engage with people and projects and pleasures from fullness instead of from emptiness, and that made all the difference. This is what's happening when you sabotage or not broken. You're not damaged. You're in the middle of a transformation that looks like destruction because something is being destroyed. The part of you that believed you need anything external to be complete, it's dying. And it feels like you're dying because you've been identified with it for so long, you don't know who you are without it. The you that needs to be saved, that needs relationships and achievements and pleasures to feel real, that you is dissolving. And the sabotage is your system's way of accelerating the process of not allowing yourself to retreat back into comfortable numbness before the transformation is complete. Consider this. A caterpillar doesn't know it's becoming a butterfly. From the caterpillar's perspective, what's happening inside the chrysalis is death, complete dissolution. Every structure it knew as itself is being broken down into primordial soup. If it could think, if it could feel fear, it would be terrified. It would interpret this process as the ultimate catastrophe, the end of everything it knows itself to be. And, in a sense, it would be right. The caterpillar does die. What emerges is something categorically different, something that couldn't exist without that complete dissolution. You are in the chrysalis. You are the primordial soup. And you keep sabotaging the things that might pull you out before the transformation is complete, before you've fully dissolved, because your system knows, at a level deeper than conscious thought, that you cannot become what you're becoming if you retreat back into being what you were. The relationships, the projects, the sources of meaning that you keep destroying, they're not bad things in themselves. They're just incompatible with the state you're moving toward. They belong to the caterpillar. They cannot survive in the butterfly. But here's what you must understand, and this is critical. There is no technique for speeding up this process, no method for forcing the transformation. Trying to become void conscious through effort is like a caterpillar trying to hurry its metamorphosis by thrashing around inside the chrysalis. All you do is exhaust yourself and potentially damage the process. The dissolution happens on its own timeline, according to its own logic, and the only thing you can do is stop interfering with it. So, what does non-interference look like? First, stop trying to fix yourself. Stop treating your sabotage as a problem to be solved. Every time you catch yourself destroying something good, instead of spiraling into self-hatred, get curious. What is this protecting? What am I not ready to return to? What identity am I refusing to re-inhabit? The sabotage is communication from a deeper part of your psyche. Listen to it instead of fighting it. Second, when the urge to fill the void arises, and it will, constantly notice it without immediately acting on it. This doesn't mean suppress it or deny it, just observe. There's the urge to text someone, to start a new project, to seek out pleasure or distraction or intensity. Notice that urge the same way you might notice hunger or fatigue. It's information, not instruction. You don't have to obey every impulse your nervous system generates. You can let it arise, let it pass, and discover that you survive the not-tacting third. Spend time with the void directly, not thinking about it, not analyzing it, not trying to make it mean something or turn it into content for your philosophical understanding. Just sit with it. Let yourself be empty. Let yourself not know what you're doing or why you're doing it or what the point of any of this is. Let yourself be bored, listless, without purpose or direction. This feels like death because you're so habituated to using activity to prove you exist. But you don't need proof. You're here. The awareness that's reading these words right now, that's aware of its own emptiness, that's already sufficient. And if you're still here, if you've read this far and something in you recognizes what's being described, subscribe if you want to keep going deeper. We explore these territories every week. You know what to do. Fourth, stop trying to be someone who has their life together. Stop trying to return to normal. Stop treating your current state as temporary. This is not a phase you're passing through on your way back to conventional life. This is an initiation into something else entirely, and you cannot complete the initiation while simultaneously trying to preserve the person who entered it. Let yourself be weird. Let yourself not fit. Let relationships and opportunities and sources of meaning fall away if they need to fall away. Trust that what's essential will remain, and what remains will be compatible with who you're becoming. Fifth, and this is the hardest one, stop seeking intensity as a substitute for presence. Your sabotage patterns are often triggered not by genuine threats, but by the absence of drama. When life becomes too calm, too stable, too ordinary, you create chaos to feel alive. But that aliveness you're chasing through intensity is just another form of avoidance. Another way of not having to sit with the simplicity of existence that doesn't require drama to justify itself. Learn to tolerate peace. Learn to tolerate the absence of crisis. Learn to exist without anything urgent demanding your attention. What to stop doing specifically. Stop entering relationships to save yourself from loneliness. Stop starting projects to prove you're productive. Stop seeking out experiences to collect stories that make you feel interesting. Stop comparing your internal emptiness to others' external presentations of fullness. Stop waiting for the right circumstance or person or insight to fix you. Stop treating your awareness of the void as a problem that needs to be solved rather than a recognition that needs to be integrated. Stop, most of all, resisting the dissolution. You cannot prevent it. You can only make it more painful by fighting it. And here's the final paradox. The void that terrifies you. The emptiness you've been sabotaging everything to avoid confronting directly, it's not your enemy. It's not a lack of something you're supposed to have. It's the background condition of existence itself, the space in which everything appears, and it was never empty in the first place. You've been running from fullness while calling it emptiness, fleeing from the only thing that was ever stable and sufficient. The awareness that you are stripped of all content and identity and meaning. What you're experiencing isn't the loss of capacity to be happy. It's not depression, though it might look like that from the outside. It's not damage or brokenness or failure to properly engage with life. It's an evolution beyond the need for happiness as conventionally understood. Beyond the need for external circumstances to determine internal states, beyond the entire framework of lacking and seeking and acquiring that structures most human lives. Some people go their entire lives without this recognition, and that's fine. They live in the dream, and the dream is convincing enough that they never question it. But you, through whatever combination of pain and insight and bad luck and grace, you've seen through the dream. You can't unsee it. And that means you can't return to the dreamer's life without constantly sabotaging it, because a part of you knows it's not real anymore. Why does this recognition come to some people and not others? That's not a question anyone can answer satisfactorily. Heidegger would say, some people are called to authentic existence, while others remain lost in the vague. Buddhism would say it's karma ripening, the culmination of countless causes and conditions. Modern psychology might point to trauma or temperament or cognitive patterns. But the truth is, nobody really knows. What matters is not why it happened, but what you do with it now that it has. What always was there, underneath all the seeking and sabotaging and desperate attempts to fill the void, was this: awareness being aware. Not awareness of something in particular, not consciousness with specific content, just the bare fact of existence experiencing itself. This sounds like nothing, because it is nothing. in the sense that it has no object, no form, no characteristics to grasp, but it's not absence. It's presence, so complete, it doesn't require anything to be present to. Its sufficiency, so fundamental, it doesn't need anything to be sufficient for. This is why it seems empty when you first encounter it. Your mind is trained to look for objects, for content, for something to grasp and understand, and incorporate into your sense of self. When it encounters pure awareness, awareness without object, it reports back. Nothing there, emptiness, void. And you believe the report because you don't yet understand that the mind can only see what has form, what has boundaries, what can be distinguished from something else. The formless background that makes all forms possible, the mind can't see that directly. It can only infer it. The way you can't see your own eye, but you know it must be there because you're seeing. What makes this seem terrifying? What makes you sabotage anything that might stabilize you before you've fully integrated this recognition is how simple it is, how nomadic, how utterly ordinary. Your mind expects enlightenment or awakening, or whatever term you want to use, to be this transcendent experience, peak states and mystical visions and profound energetic shifts. And when what you encounter instead is just the basic fact of existence, awareness, being aware, with no fireworks and no drama and no special feeling, the mind rejects it. That can't be it. That's too simple. That's too boring. That's not worth all this suffering and seeking and sabotage. But here's the ultimate recognition, the one that completes the transformation. It was always only this. Everything you've been seeking, every source of meaning you've pursued and then sabotaged. Every relationship and achievement and pleasure and intensity, all of it was an elaborate detour around the one thing that was never not here. You are the thing you've been seeking, not you as personality or identity or life story, but you as the space in which all of that appears. And that space was never empty. It was never lacking. It never needed anything added to it to make it complete. You're already there. You've always been there. The sabotage isn't preventing you from arriving at some future state of salvation. It's preventing you from retreating back into the illusion that you were ever anywhere else. When you destroy relationships and opportunities and sources of meaning, you're not destroying your path to happiness. You're destroying the paths that lead away from the recognition you've already had, the truth you've already seen, the void that was never empty. The void was never empty. You were just looking away, and now you can't look away anymore. And that's not tragedy. That's grace. That's freedom. That's the end of seeking and the beginning of simply being what you already are. What you always were, what you could never stop being no matter how hard you tried to escape it through pleasure or pain or sabotage or salvation. This is you. Right now, already complete, already sufficient, already home. You just haven't noticed yet, but you will. The sabotage will continue until you do.